It is good to be here tonight. Wanted to start just to share a little bit about our ministry as well. As he said, we have the Semi-Source Mobile Creation Museum. We have put about 80,000 people through that in the last 7 years. And so our goal of that was to go out and reach the lost, ultimately. But we also have just the Lord has put into our laps a creation museum that we have put together here in Broken Bow, Nebraska. And so if any of you are going through Nebraska, especially on your way to South Dakota, or know people, even on your Instagram, all your social media garbage that we have nowadays, promote that as well. Basically, here you can kind of see it. This is going into our Founders of Science and Archaeology room. And then after that, every room is going to have some sort of interactive thing for kids to do. We tried to make it fun for kids as well. This little interactive floor here, you're walking on the moon. And so as you walk on it, you leave your footprints behind. Just a number of things in here to show the astronomical evidences of a young Earth. You go into Noah's Ark room here. That's going to deal with fossilization and a lot of the questions that people have about Noah's Ark, and how could dinosaurs go on the Ark, and where did it land, and all those kind of things. You go into the geology room here, where we talk about rapid fossilization, how the mountains form, and how the flood plays a part of all of this ultimately, as well as dealing with Mount St. Helens and the dating methods, and showing how really the dating methods actually give, I think, more support for a young Earth than it does for an old Earth, as well as some interaction things for kids to do, dig pits and so on. There's a lot more too, but this education room is still being renovated, so it looks a little outdated, but we'll go through that quickly. But we do have classes and things like that in there. Go into the Ice Age room, and in the Ice Age room dealing with what caused the Ice Age. How long did it last? The typical questions that people have, and basically showing how Noah's flood did that. You go into the cell room looking at design of the human body and the amazing DNA and what we're discovering about that. Once you exit the cell, you enter into the giant room, and here we're going to deal with a number of things, some more archaeology with David and Goliath, so the so-called missing links and Lucy, discussing how those things really aren't what they say they are. It's more interaction for the kids. There's a lot more on this wall now here. We took this video before we have finished things, but Tower of Babel in there. Then you go into the dinosaur room, which will talk about the obvious, things that have questions people have about dinosaurs, and vestigial organs to biomimicry, the so-called whale evolution and why that just doesn't work. Like I said, a number of answers for the dinosaurs. Are they in the Bible? Are they around today? Did they live with people? And show you all the evidence that they did live with people from, around the world, really, ultimately, and through many centuries as well. Then you're going to come up and go over this bridge. We see Megalodon up there. Once you go over the bridge, you enter into a gospel room that gives a final gospel message, showing why all of this is important, as well as just some logical things that our kids need to know. You need to know, because we're running into people all the time talking about things that just are so illogical, and we need to train them. Don't judge me. Well, you just judged me, and saying don't judge other people, just those kind of arguments are discussed there. But anyway, here's the gospel TV that shows you that. So anyway, if you get a chance to come to Nebraska, pass that along. And our grand opening is going to be April 13th. We've got ICR is coming down as well to help with that grand opening, and so we're excited about getting that going.
Is there a golf course in Broken Bow?
A golf course. Man, I should know that, because I've been going up there. It's 100 miles from where I live. And so I have made so many trips up there, but I have not seen a golf course. All I've seen is the road to that museum and back to my house. So, yeah. But anyway, tonight we are going to be talking about what I call supernatural selection, and I want to give credit where credit is due. This is really kind of building off of Dr. Randy Galuza from the Institute for Creation Research. And I think that one of the things that I do in my ministry is I like to take things that are up here and put the cookies on the low shelf so that other people can understand them. I'm not smart enough to do what all of these other, geniuses are doing out there, but I can relay what the geniuses are finding out. And so I speak to a lot of kids and, do debates at universities and things like that. But I think it's important for us as creationists to take this information and put it into something that people can understand, or else we don't gain any ground. And so, but really, I think that Randy Galuza and ICR are the leaders in this type of thing that we're going to be talking about tonight that I've titled Supernatural Selection. Now, they're really going to be talking about continuous environmental tracking, and I'll mention that here as we go. But before we do, I want to really kind of start out by looking at what Scripture says here. It says, "Thou shalt not have no other gods before me." And it's kind of amazing how I believe that there are many in the church, many Christians have been practicing idol worship, and they didn't even know it. But it has truly, truly been idol worship. I have here just a little scarecrow you can see in my hand. Now, if I would take this scarecrow and I would say, "Hey, scarecrow, come to life," and all of a sudden this scarecrow would start to rise up. Okay. You might think that somehow this scarecrow could, have some powers and maybe deserve worship of some sort because, wow, it's amazing. If I told it to go to sleep and all of a sudden it started to go to sleep, that you would think there's something to this. I want you to understand what an idol is. An idol isn't because of the object of what it is that it can rise up or go back to sleep. An idol is basically when you ascribe powers to something. It could be even an idea. And when you ascribe powers to those things, they can become worshipped idols. I believe that's what happened in the Old Testament ultimately. We see all these idols that people would worship, and I remember thinking, how dumb do you have to be to take a piece of wood, stand it up, and bow down to it and worship this thing? But then I began to realize that people are deceived very easily. I'm seeing that today a lot. And I believe that there were people, I believe that Satan is powerful. I believe that he basically gave powers to inanimate objects. And then as a result, people began to worship them. Now this is just a trick. This is not an idol. There's nothing worthy of worship of this, of course. And even if it did do that, you shouldn't worship it, right? We're going to come back to that, but I want you to think about that as we go through this evening. You see, one of the things that's amazing, I'm sure you guys have all heard about the blind cavefish. Like I said, I've been doing debates. I debated Dan Barker at the Freedom from Religion Foundation in Madison, Wisconsin here a few years back, and he was bringing up the blind cavefish. Ken Ham debated Bill Nye the Science Lie. He also was bringing up the blind cavefish. What's so big? What's the big deal about blind cavefish? Well, as the story goes, these fish, basically because they've been in the dark for so many years in caves, didn't get any sunlight, they began to lose their eyes. Their skin pigmentation or scale pigmentation went away, so they looked very pink like this. And you see, that is natural selection. That is evolution. I've never understood that. You see, I'll get back to this in a moment, but there's over 120 different types of blind cavefish. What amazes me about that is the fact that this means that each one of these had to evolve in the same way. What I was taught about evolution is chance random processes, accidents, mutations. Have you guys ever seen accidents on the freeway? I bet you have. Have you ever seen two that look exactly the same? Not a one. They always look different, don't they? Accidents don't repeat themselves. And I've never seen an accident reverse itself either. Where you back up and your car, boop, nice. I'd buy that car. Okay? But we don't see that happening. But here are these blind cavefish seeing what they look like. But what's amazing is the Institute for Creation Research has taken these blind cavefish, they took them and they stuck it in sunlight, and 30 days later, this fish looked like that. This is the same fish, a picture of the same one. 30 days! What happened to millions of years? Yeah. You see, but this is the mantra that we have heard time and time and time again throughout all of our education, schooling, everywhere we go, that evolution takes millions of years and its mutations. And I credit Randy Galuzza for saying, we as creationists need to apologize. We've been wrong. And I agree with him 100%. It's not that we've been way off track, but we have been off track. You see, natural selection, the thing that I never could understand, here I'm going to show you here, I'll get to that actually. Here's their fish, here's what a regular fish looks like. The eye hasn't come back yet, but we don't know. Maybe it will. In generations, I suspect it will, because I believe the information for that eye is still in the DNA of that fish. This is new stuff that ICR is doing. Okay, we see the same thing here with the beaks of the finch from the Galapagos Islands. And the story of millions of years and changing, but now we see that these changes are rapid. That depending on the food that the finch eats, it will change, sometimes in seasons, but typically within 2 generations, we can see these things go back and forth. If it's eating, the nuts and the hard things of nature, the beak gets thicker to accommodate its ability to be able to eat hard nuts. But if it's eating soft people food, the beak gets smaller and less defined. But the food determines what the beak is going to look like, and it doesn't take millions of years, it doesn't even take hundreds of years, it's within 2 generations or even within a season they see some of these changes taking place. So in our articles, and by the way, every article that I'm going to show you is coming from non-Christian, secular articles, secular magazines, secular science. But they're talking about things like rapid adaptations taking place. Rapid adaptations.
Heresy.
Yeah, well, it's not. Rapid adaptation is true, but to say that that's evolution is a heresy. You see, that doesn't fit. Rapid adaptation does not fit in any way, shape, or form in any way the way that evolution has been taught to you, I, and our children. So we'll talk about that more here too, but we see the peppered moths. Now I've talked against the peppered moths for years. As the story goes, you've got these 2 different kinds of moths. And years ago, before the Industrial Revolution, what happened was that these moths would land on trees, but the trees were a lighter color so that they blended in with the lighter moths. So the birds would come out and eat all the darker moths, so there were like only 5% of the darker moths and 95% of the lighter moths. But the Industrial Revolution came, and they started burning all the the fossil fuels, and the trees became a darker color. So now the darker ones blended in, and the lighter ones stuck out like a sore thumb, so the birds ate all of those, and now you had 95% of the opposite. Okay, I never understood that either, because here's the problem. Big deal. So if now you got 95% of one and 5% of the other, does that mean the other 5% or the 95% turn into birds? No, one's just going to go extinct, right? It really never had anything to do with evolution. But in our textbooks, they did what was called bait and switch. They would bait you with, look, natural selection, look, it's happening right here. See, that's how evolution happens. Lie. They took a truth. Look, natural selection. Yep. Turns into evolution. Nope. Lie. Bait you with truth, switch it to a lie. And they do this kind of thing all the time. It's very dangerous. You probably heard people saying, some of the questions that are asked in textbooks, like, do you think humans are still evolving? How are our kids supposed to answer those questions? There's no right answer to that. Do you think kids, or evolutionists, or do you think things are still evolving? To say yes means they're still evolving. To say no means they used to evolve, right? Yeah. That's like saying, hey, have you stopped beating your wife yet? Right? Yeah. Or have you stopped taking drugs yet? If I answer that question and say yes, it means I used to take drugs. If I say no, you know what's wrong with me. But that's the problem. And that's what they have done for years and years and years. So that was the issue, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. You see, what ends up happening here with this, not only does natural selection have nothing to do with evolution, but, oh, by the way, they lied with the pictures too. This never happened. And do you know when birds come out to feed? Not at night, when the moths are out, right? So it never happened. They took dead moths and glued them on these trees to take the pictures that are in our textbooks. It's what they did. They've admitted it. So it has nothing to do with evolution. But what we have now discovered, because of what is now called epigenetics, okay? And to make it simple, epigenetics, you know how we always have dominant and recessive genes, right? And we explained everything based on, well, you got a dominant gene or you got a recessive gene, but it's much more complex than that. We're discovering, that's the broad picture, but if you narrow this down, we've discovered it is so much more simple. In epigenetics, we're finding that there are portions of the genes that can actually be turned on or turned off. It's not mutated. The information isn't even lost. It's just activated or not activated. And so we can now take in genes, and not only we in labs, but the DNA does this itself. It can do genetic splicing, where it will take a portion of it and take it out and even put it into a different spot. Incredible. And all of this is being done without anybody telling it to do it. We'll get to how it happens. But what they've discovered is that the DNA that we have been teaching about is not static. We assumed you get DNA, you get what you get. Okay, I'm the youngest of 7 kids. Okay, I've got a 6'6" brother, a 6'3" brother, a 6'2" brother. My dad was 6'1", and then there's me. You get what you get. They took all the good stuff, left me with this. Okay? But it's not like that. Because, I used to say, well, they got the tall genes. I got the short genes. No, not necessarily. Sometimes it's a matter of things being turned off or turned off. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't genetic and, or the recessive and dominant. That's true, but that's oversimplifying it. It's much more complex. And so, anyway, what's happened is that there is a certain gene for the, I keep wanting to say melanin, but basically the pigmentation that is flipped on, and so that these moths can actually change color based on the environment it's in. You know how a chameleon can do that? That amazes me. Or octopuses, sometimes you go, are they called octopi? I don't know what. Or is that what it is, octopi? Okay. So the octopi, when they go, it's just boom, and they change. It's like, it's incredible. How do they do that? They're adjusting to their environment, aren't they? And that is one reason, as you're going to see, why they call this, at ICR, continuous environmental tracking. They're continually monitoring the environment around them, tracking it, and as it changes, they change. Those finches, different environment, they change. Great example here, in the colder climates we have these northern pikes, right? Northern pike fish. You put them in a lake, they eat everything, right? They'll eat the bass, they'll eat the perch. If they do that, nothing happens in the lake. But as soon as those eat a Cretan carp, it eats it, it digests that carp, it excretes it out. The rest of the lake then, the rest of the carp in that lake go, that smells like Bob. They recognize that one of their cousins has been eaten. And the rest of the carp in that entire lake, within 24 hours, change shape. Where they get this hump on their back, they become more streamlined and harder to swallow. 24 hours, not millions of years. But yet I've grown up, even today I can see articles, and when I would do debates, everybody to support evolution is saying, look at this fish and look at that fish. It's got a longer snout. You see, over millions of years it developed a longer snout to develop, a sucking up prey versus, grabbing prey or whatever the case might be. Look at this turtle and that turtle. Look at this dog and that dog. Look at this fish and this fish. It was always these little minute changes that they were hailing as this great evidence of evolution. And yet, it's all been a lie. It had nothing to do with evolution. It's happening quickly, 24 hours. The reef racefish. You get one of these male fish will swim around in about a school of 10 to 15 female fish. That's it. Just small schools. One male, the rest females. Well, what happens if a fisherman comes along and catches that male, or if another fish comes and eats that male? I guess the females are going to die without a male, right? Well, not quite. Within 24 hours again, the largest female in that school begins to grow testes and becomes the new male. 24 hours. Now, it does not work that way in the human kind. Okay? So don't go there. But absolutely incredible. We would have never dreamt that this kind of stuff was happening. But now, because we're studying these genetics, we're seeing that there are genes that are turned on because of an environment. They recognize something and they will change it. Give you some better examples of this. Mice. They took these mice and they stuck them on an electric plate that zapped them every time they introduced the scent of cherry blossom. So they introduced the scent, zap the mice. So the mice learned, I don't like cherries. Well, they do this for 70 days. The reason is because that's the cycle of sperm. And they only did this to the males. Then they took the males and they went and put them in with females so that they could mate. Then the females had kids. They took the baby mice, they killed them to examine them. And guess what? Every single one of those babies had an enlarged olfactory bulb that made them not like the scent of cherry blossom. Not only is this happening here, but we can pass it on to our children. Wow. Passing this information on through the sperm. You've probably heard that phrase, you are what you eat. There's more truth to that than we've realized. Do you know now studies have been done that say that if you eat very unhealthy, let's say that all you want to eat is ho-hos and ding-dongs, right? You may think it doesn't matter. I don't care. I've already got my wife. She loves me anyway. The problem is that studies have been done that show that you actually, when you do that, may be passing on the gene to your children and give them a higher probability of having diabetes and other diseases because you couldn't control yourself. When God gives us rules about food and, you should not be gluttonous, maybe He had reasons for that. That it was for your own good to protect you, right? And we see, even the studies have been done in Russia. They took a group of people that have been living in famine, not very much food availability. And they looked and they saw that their children, when they examined their children, they had a gene that had been flipped on that allowed them to use calories more efficiently. They were prepared for a famine environment because their fathers passed that information on. Then they took them, and the children after, they saw where there was abundance, and they looked at the children, and the opposite. The caloric, they didn't use it as efficiently after that. It goes back and forth based on the environment we're in. Because you see, God knew there was going to be a vast array of different environments that we were going to have to live in. And we needed to be able to adapt. We'll come back to that. It's like GM when they make cars and things like that. Most of your cars here probably have some sort of sensor that tells you how hot or cold it is outside. And so there's logic. There's a sensor. Randy talks about this. There's a sensor, then there's a logic, and there's an output, a response to that. The sensor tells you it's 40 degrees outside, but you have it set in your car, you want it 70 degrees. So there is logic that says, too cold, turn on the heat. The heat turns on. You don't have to do a thing. It just does it all automatically. It responds to the logic that the sensor tells it. That is what we see in things that are engineered. And that is what we're seeing with this continuous environmental tracking. So it's not that we were wrong in teaching natural selection. Natural selection is true. Naturally, things are selected out. I used to show a picture of these two sheep. One's a regular looking sheep and one has these short little stubby legs. And I show it and I say, all right, when the wolf comes, who's going to get it? Shorty, he's out of there. He's like, hey guys, wait up, right? Gone. Naturally, the wolf selects out the mutated genes. Okay? That's what I would teach. Now, there's some truth to that. Absolutely. Again, the other sheep don't turn into cows. It has nothing to do with evolution. But nonetheless, it was God's quality control. Now, while that is true, where creationists were wrong, remember I said that we needed to apologize? Here is where we were wrong. We allowed evolutionists to drive the narrative. What I mean by that is this. Evolution was saying, why do these changes happen? Mutations, millions of years, bad things happening. And creationists, we said, yes, bad things happen. Mutations do happen. I mean, it's amazing what the body can do. It checks for mutations, but every now and then one slips by. And the evolutionists came back and said, yes, that's right, but you give millions of years. I mean, you're talking just, little changes, but give millions of years of little changes add up to a lot of little changes. A lot of little changes means big changes. And our response was, yeah, no. There isn't millions of years, and so you don't get big changes. You only get little changes. And it's always among a kind. Things reproduce after their kind. Dogs are always dogs. Fish are always fish. Basically we would say that, dogs have puppies, fish have guppies, and people have yuppies. Right? Again, truth to that, we only reproduce after our kinds, but we were allowing mutations and bad things and just accidents to control while the change was there. In other words, we were giving the credit for what we see happening to the curse. We kicked God off of His throne. We said, you don't have any power, God. You're not involved in our lives. You just created the world, sit back and let the curse do its thing. Instead, we want to put God back on His throne and say, God, we're sorry we did that. Now we see this has nothing to do with mistakes, but it has everything to do with a design that has been pre-programmed into virtually every living thing. And now God gets the glory, not the curse. You see, they even say, like Scientific American, no clue how life began. No kidding. And not only do they have no clue how life began, but even once life begins, they have no clue of how things adapt from one kind to another species. Okay? But we are discovering now that we do. It's information, pre-programmed, engineered into every living creature. This guy here, the leading expert in lizards in the world, what he did is, we see that lizards that live in the forests have longer legs. When they live in the brushy, sandy areas, they have shorter legs. Well, there were 7 islands, and on these 7 islands, a hurricane came, wiped out all of the lizards on all 7 islands. So they went and repopulated these islands with lizards from the forests. So all these islands got long-legged lizards. What do you think is going to happen? Because now there's no forest on these islands. They lived in a forested environment. Now they no longer do. He says this, our prediction was that they would evolve shorter legs. They did. Over the course of 4 years, not millions of years, 4 years, the average limb length steadily declined on all 7 islands, exactly as predicted. All 7 islands were evolving in lockstep. Wow! I want you to catch something. Can you see what they've done? Bait and switch. Bait you with truth. Look, the legs changed. Switch it to evolve. No, that does not fit in any way, shape, or form of the definition of what you have been taught about evolution. Evolution is mutations over millions of years. Mutations don't happen the same way, in a predictable way, in different areas. Can't happen that way. This is programmed into the creatures. What they're doing is they've changed the definition of evolution today, hoping that you guys will not notice. Hoping that we can just say, hey, no, this is it. You see? We've been telling you all the time. And that you'll just let them get away with it. Don't let them get away with it. This is God's power that we're seeing here. You're seeing words like this all the time in our scientific journals, everywhere. Things like regulated, rapid, repeatable, reversible, predictable. Evolution's not predictable. It's certainly not reversible. Like I said, that accident on the freeway, back up, there you go, everything's good. Doesn't work that way. This instead is something much greater. And again, that's why they're calling it continuous environmental tracking. When NASA built the space shuttle or anything else that they're sending out into outer space, and by the way, they are sending things into outer space, if you know what I mean. We see that they go and they'll sit down for years and they plan and they're trying to think of any kind of thing that could go wrong. And anything that they can think of that's going to go wrong, they try to program in a response to keep that from happening or to fix it if it does happen. I mean, hundreds and thousands of solutions to problems. That's what engineers do. Well, don't you think the ultimate engineer, the creator of the universe, would do the same thing when He made you? Do you think that when Adam and Eve fell and the fall happened, God was up there in heaven going, Eve, what are you doing? Eve, 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 no, 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 oh no! Oh! Now what am I going to do? Didn't surprise Him one bit. He knew exactly. God knew that we were going to live in a fallen world. He knew that there was going to be a change in seasons. He knew there was an ice age coming. He knew all of these things. He knew that there were going to be times of famine. There was going to be times of plenty. And if He didn't know and program solutions into us to be able to adapt to that, we'd be dead a long time ago. We are adapting all the time. kind of a simple example, but when I go, I'm in ministry, so I'm cheap. I keep in the winter our house at about 60 degrees. Okay? I know all you women are thinking, that poor woman that he's married to. You're right. I keep it cold. And we adapt to that. We're comfortable. First few weeks it's a little rough. But we get there. But then in the summertime, because I'm cheap, it goes to 75 to 80. I just got to get the humidity out. But do you know that in the summertime, if I put that thermostat at 60 degrees, I'd be like, right? And in the summer, or in the winter, if I put it up at 75 or 80, I'd be like, so hot. But I adapt. And so we are constantly monitoring the environment, adapting to the world around us. Not only just in those simple ways, but in the more complex ways, like I was saying with the famines. And so God has clearly He clearly put in us the ability to adapt because He knew we were going to live in hostile environments and that we would continuously need to be monitoring that environment. Not consciously, but just the body doing it on its own. Just like your air conditioner or your car, you don't have to think about, once you set it to 70, set it and forget it. You don't have to think about it, it just does it automatically. And that's what we're seeing is going on here all the time. Another cool one here, they took guinea pigs and they put them on a heating pad for 70 days. Only the males. Now guinea pigs carry their important parts low to the ground, if you know what I mean. And so for 70 days they cooked those important parts. Then they took them out and they put them in with the females, mated them, and then their children. Do you know that their children had 18 genes that were altered to allow them to live in warmer climates? Again, passed on through the sperm to the next generation because the father was saying, this is a hostile environment. Amazing. Guys, this is an evolution. This is just like, this makes me go, God, you are so amazing. You are so incredible. We see it in other ways too. Do you know that we have found elephants, little dwarf elephants, full grown, the size, waist high? I want one so bad. But you know why they're only that big? Because they're on islands. And on those islands, if they were all big, the island can't take care of that many animals. It can't provide enough food. Now, do you think that elephant's back sitting there, well, I think I'm going to stop growing right now because if there's too many of us, we won't make it. You see, DNA can't think and reason. Elephants can't think and reason. By the way, in case you think they can, you're wrong. The Bible says they can't. Jude talks about it, Peter talks about it. These ungodly, they're like unreasoning animals that operate on instinct. Animals don't reason. Oh, you can condition them, but I'm sorry, an animal is stupid. They're dumb. The smartest animal I've ever seen is dumb when I compare them to the spiritual nature of man. My message on amazing animals will go into that into greater detail. I love animals, so don't be offended. I know you guys say, don't call my dog dumb. Yeah, no, it's dumb, all right? It can't do math. It can't write music. Okay, you can train it to do certain things, but so for a dog, maybe it's smart, but it's a dumb animal. Cannot reason. Animals, DNA, none of that can reason these things out. It just happens because it's not them doing it. This is our Creator that has programmed this in us, just like that GM programmed it into your car. Unbelievable. It's the size. The island says, nope, you can't get that many. We see the same thing in fish. We should have known this for years because have you ever taken a fish and you stick it in an aquarium? It's like, a shark. How big is it going to get?
Big as the aquarium.
Yeah, only as big as the aquarium allows it to get. It's only going to get real small, but then put it in a bigger aquarium. Now it'll get bigger. Fish didn't know that. But somehow, God has programmed it in to know that it monitored its environment and it adapted to it. I love it. I'm going to skip the beetle for now here, but it's just incredible. This lady here in Nebraska, she is like the leading expert on mice. Kind of like the lizards, the mice have longer tails if they live in the forest. If they live in the sandhills of Nebraska, they have shorter tails. Well, they move them around, and guess what? The tails go long or get short. Even get extra vertebrae. Yeah. Okay, has nothing to do with evolution, has everything to do with the environment it's in, and pre-programmed information. By the way, you may have seen National Geographic a few years back had this thing on dinosaurs and how they evolved into birds, and they took chicken eggs because they think dinosaurs turned into chickens and ostriches and emus and things like that. So they took chicken eggs, and they basically, it's a precursor of what we're discovering now. They would take what they call it the Hox gene. It's like a certain area that is in charge of certain areas of development. And they would stimulate the one for the tail, and they were able to get like an extra vertebrae on the chicken tail. Okay? And so they were saying, see, this is what happened. Mutations and whatnot happened so that the dinosaur, as it was turning into a bird, lost its tail. And then it gained feathers, and they were able to turn off the gene that wanted to produce feathers. So they could have these chickens that came out just about naked. You know what you got? A cold chicken. One that wouldn't survive in a natural environment, right? Yeah, had nothing to do with evolution, but this is what they were trying to say is how evolution happens, when in fact what it was there was programmed information into the genetics. Nothing to do with evolving. So anyway, she says longer tails have evolved repeatedly, controlled by separate genetic loci, not a random process. Well, then it's not evolution. Okay? Not at all. Evolution has been wrong with virtually everything that they have taught. They taught about our vestigial organs here. You don't need your appendix. You needed that when you were evolving. But now, since you evolved, you don't need it anymore, so it's gone. Or useless, I should say. So when you'd have some problem, they'd open you up. They'd say, well, as long as we're in here, let's take out the appendix. Right? Now they realize you get rid of your appendix, it increases your chances of leukemia, Hodgkin's disease, cancer of the colon, cancer of the ovaries. Oops, sorry. The thalamus gland, same thing. They've radiated children because of an enlarged thalamus gland, and now realize that, oops, and they gave our children teenagers now that are getting all kinds of problems because of that. I mean, I can go on and on where a pathologist friend of mine said we have mutilated some of our people because of evolution and what we have allowed evolution to teach. Gill slits. They used to say that, the fetus inside a mother's womb, it's got these gill slits, which is wrong on every account. They're not gills, they're not slits, and it's not a fetus. It's a child. God didn't come to Abraham and Sarah, thou art with fetus. He says, thou art with child. Okay? They weren't gills, they're not slits, they're wrinkles that turn into the jaw, the glands, and the ear. Everything's been wrong. Junk DNA, they've been telling us that 80% of our DNA was junk. Now they're like, oops, guess we're wrong. You see, part of that was, still we don't know what all of it is, but now they're discovering that much of what it were these genes that just aren't activated at the time. Okay? And so now they're backing away from this themselves. This isn't just creationists talking. They are even saying it's not all junk, like they were saying. They used to say we were over 98% genetically identical to a chimpanzee. Now, not even close. And by the way, even at 98.9%, or 98.6 is what they were saying, that was genetically so far different that it meant nothing. I mean, do you know that you are very much identical to dirt? But you're quite different, right? Genetic similarity didn't mean anything with relationship at all. I mean, Well, look at a watermelon. It's like, what is it, 98% water or 95% water? I think it's 95% water. And then you've got a rain cloud's 100% water. Only 5% difference. It could be related. And I might have found the missing link. Do you know a jellyfish is 98% water? So, just watermelon, jellyfish, cloud. Just evolution right there. You see, it has nothing to do with it. They were wrong. Right? Wrong again. They were wrong about Neanderthals. Now they say most of a population has Neanderthal DNA in them. Okay, you can read the book Traced by Jensen, I think it is, and see that we can trace the male Y chromosome back 4,500 years. Why 4,500 years? Well, that just so happens to be when it starts all over again at Noah's flood from Noah. And from that single one, it just so happens to break off into 3 kinds. Just so happens Noah had 3 sons. Okay, I mean, everywhere we look, we are seeing evidence of a young earth. We are seeing evidence that evolution has been taking us down the wrong trail. They've been wrong about death. Death is the hero. Steve Jobs, when he was giving his speech at Stanford, I think it was, he already had been diagnosed with his cancer, pancreatic cancer. He was dying of it. And what he said was this: death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent. That's what evolution teaches, folks. Death is the hero. It's the good thing. You must die and then things get better. Death and disease lead to good things. It's life's change agent. Because you know that's wrong. I mean, who of you goes and sees, a lion attacking a tiger or a zebra or something like that, and you're like, oh, life's change agent. No, you know death is a bad thing. I get a kick out of these climate change people. First of all, what a political hoax. Second of all, I mean, they're like, save the polar bears! I'm like, you seal hater. Pick a side. You go for the seals, you hate the polar bears. You like the polar bears, you hate the seal. You see, we know death is not good. It's in us to know that. Unless, of course, we're talking about Jesus' death, and even that wasn't good. What was good was His resurrection, conquering death. They've been wrong about everything. Time and time again, people tell me, Brian, you got to stop being so divisive. This whole idea of creation, it's just dividing churches. It's not important. Well, you know something? There's 3 different people here. This study went from 1990 to 2015. Okay? So a 25-year study, and what they did is they took 3 groups of people. Those that believed that the Bible was inspired, but it was just figurative. I believe in God's Word, but Adam and Eve may not be real people, and so on. Okay? Then there's the people who took the Bible literally, and then there's the people that believed the Bible was just a bunch of fables. Okay? It's not inspired. It is just like Little Red Riding Hood all around. They followed them for those 25 years. Do you know the numbers, okay, of people who took the Bible literally after 25 years? The numbers remained the same. The people who believed that the Bible was inspired but figurative, their numbers actually began to drop. They became more like, closer to the middle line. And those that believed that the Bible was just a bunch of fables, well, they decreased as well and became more towards the end. They lost their numbers. In essence, what we're seeing is this. The inspired but figurative, more of them began to believe it was literal. These people more began to believe, the Bible must be true. Slow and steady wins the race. You see, I'm going to stand on the truth of the Word of God. I'm not going to wave back and forth with every wind and wave of doctrine that comes by. I'm going to stand on truth, and you know what? It's going to win. I've been standing on the Word of God. I've been teaching this now for 30 years. I've been teaching about creation, and do you know I haven't really had to go back and recant on anything on the Word of God. Just like the scriptures say, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and always. Or Malachi, I, the Lord, do not change. But yet, I've eaten eggs and then thought maybe I better not eat eggs. And then I thought, oh, I maybe might want to eat eggs. And then I thought I better not eat eggs because we can't keep up changing our minds. Science is constantly changing, but the Bible does not. Does not change. You want to stay steady? I've seen so many times these type of things happening. It's not controversial. It's holding firm to the anchor. That's what it is. In getting closing out here, Romans 1:22 says this. And by the way, before it says that, he had it up on the screen, that we can see God's power, qualities, and nature through that which has been made so that men are without excuse. By looking at God's creation, you are without excuse to deny God's existence. And the more we know about His creation, like we've seen tonight, the more you ought to say, there is no way this is anything but an all-powerful, omnipotent, omniscient God. It says, although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. They exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images, made to look like mortal man, birds, animals, and reptiles. Almost sounds like our society today, doesn't it? They gave them over to the sinful desires of their hearts, to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie. The truth about God and being a creator, and they're all exchanging it for animals and evolution and natural selection, all of these kinds of things. And it says they served in the created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. I want to go back to this whole idea of idol worship. Look at this article. Darwin's theory of natural selection accounts for the design of organisms and for their wondrous diversity as the result of natural processes. Did you catch that? Natural selection. It's nothing but an idea, a concept. What does that idea have the power to do? Design. What did Romans tell us? That they're going to exchange the truth of God for a lie. They're going to worship created things, ideas in their minds, rather than the Creator itself. They're going to ascribe to some idea the power of God to design. Natural selection is personified and given attributes that only God has. Look at this lady. Darwin was brilliant to make natural selection a sort of God-like term. An expression that could replace God. Who did it? He created life forms. Natural selection creates. If you look in our articles in magazines, you'll see that natural selection favors. Natural selection punishes. Natural selection selects. Natural selection designs. These are all things natural selection cannot do. This guy says biologists now tend to believe profoundly that natural selection is the invisible hand that crafts well-wrought forms. Remember I said an idol isn't worship because of what it looks like or what it is made of or what it does. It is worship because of the power that is given to it. I am telling you, natural selection is an idol that has been set up in the minds of even people within the church today. And we have bowed down and given qualities that only belong to God to this weird thing called natural selection. Last slide here. In closing out, I want you guys to understand something. Hebrews 12 says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before Him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. He is the author and the perfecter of our faith. Do you know what the greatest epigenetic, well, I don't know if I better say that, but the greatest pre-programmed design that God did in you was conscience. You know, Romans tells us that our conscience will bear witness against us on the day of judgment. Conscience, it's an interesting word. It means con means with, science means knowledge. With knowledge is what conscience means. That's why when you do something you're not supposed to do, you feel bad about it because you have a conscience. You are doing it with knowledge that it's wrong. Where did that come from? Did you have to teach your children not to murder their sister or brother? No. Yeah. No, they might have been angry, but they knew it was wrong deep inside. But you know what the Bible tells us? Timothy says we can sear our conscience. We can sear it, we can reject it, but there is no such thing as an atheist. Ray Comfort is great about talking about that. There is no such thing as an atheist, because I'm telling you, every atheist in the world knows that there is a God. Romans tells us this. In that same part that we were saying in chapter 1, it goes on. You know, they reject God. God hands them over to this, and it says that the wrath of God is now being revealed from heaven against the godlessness and the wickedness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. What do they do to the truth? Suppress it. You don't suppress something you don't know is there. They suppress the truth. And I'm telling you, as we see in epigenetics here, as we see this design that has been pre-programmed into us, the only way to deny that there is a God is to suppress that truth, sweep it under the rug, and sear your conscience. But God has put a conscience in you. In Romans as well, it says this, that He will put His laws in your hearts and in your minds. Your hearts and your minds. You see, the law of God is there because God knew when He pre-programmed you that there was going to be a fall. And He was going to want to pull you and draw you to Him. And so when I see this pre-programmed information, I can't help but see the pre-programmed spiritual information God has put in us. That's the greatest design feature in us today. To lead us and call us back to our Savior, because I'm telling you something, we have all broken God's commands. We are all sinners, and we all need Jesus Christ because He is the only one that can take away those sins. So as you go and see all these adaptations taking place, don't forget that. Remember that. Well, I'm out of time. Back on the table, I have a set of our DVDs here. You get all of these for $25. DVDs are starting to go out. I give you permission to burn them onto your computer, burn them onto flash drives, burn them onto whatever you want. I don't care. If you don't have a DVD player, game consoles play it as well. You can still buy a DVD player cheaper than you can buy this set of DVDs. I also have 4 of my books out there. If you want those 4 books, they're $10 each, or if you buy the set, you can have all 4 books for $10 extra. So $25 and then $35 for all 4 books and the DVDs. So just so you know what's out there. Thank you guys for allowing me to be a part of this here tonight. I'll turn it over and take some questions afterwards.